Anyway, please don't forget to subscribe, like the video, leave a comment before you fall asleep. It helps me a lot. Also, my channel is not monetized, so if you want to support me and have access to extra videos, please check out my Patreon at Whittler ASMR. Now, I suggest that if you want to fall asleep, that you lay back, relax, maybe close your eyes, and just listen to the sounds. Tonight I want to talk to you guys about a case that I've talked about before, and that is the missing case of Sebastian Rogers. A case that for some reason I feel a deep connection to and I think about every now and then, ever since he went missing in February. So let's get into his story. When you imagine a door closing, the clink of a lamp switch, the murmur of a house breathing at 2 in the morning, it can be easy to forget how fragile the pattern of everyday life can be. Sebastian Wayne Drake Rogers was a boy whose life, his routines, the small contours of his day were suddenly, terrifically interrupted. This is not an attempt to solve what happened to him, because nobody knows. It is an attempt to listen, to gather, and to hold his story in the light that it deserves. Sebastian was a teenager, 15 years old, from Hendersonville, Tennessee. He was born on December 7th, 2008. He had autism. Now it is really hard to decide what. I'm saying he was, but we don't know if he's alive or not. But unfortunately, often in these cases when someone goes missing, especially in these circumstances, I doubt that he's somewhere out there, alive. So this boy, Sebastian, he had autism. He's described in some reporting and by his family as high functioning in some ways, but with needs and vulnerabilities that made him depend on familiar structures and his caregivers. On the night of February 25, 2024, oh man, I almost forgot that this case was from last year. I thought it was 2025. Life just passes by, doesn't it? So according to family statements and the official missing person timeline, he went missing on February 25th, 2024. They said that he went to bed in discovered that he was not there. He had left the house without his phone, his wallet, or anything normal that someone would grab when leaving the house. He basically just got up and went out. Allegedly. He was barefoot and carrying only a small yellow flashlight. This is the outline the investigators started with. The house was intact. There was no clear sign of worst injury. Family members at home. A boy gone from the small orbit of his home. Those facts are laid out in the FBI's public notice seeking help to find Sebastian. From the first days, search teams combed territory and followed every thread that they could. They used drones, helicopters, dive teams, search dogs, and volunteers. A hasty and solemn mobilization across thousands of acres. Because when someone disappears, the early window is everything. Local and regional agencies worked alongside search and rescue volunteers. There were tips that arrived and were checked. Flyovers looked for a shoe, a shimmer of a jacket, the wrong shape in the brush, just the way they always do with any missing case person. Over weeks and months, law enforcement expanded the canvas. They searched landfill searches. They did checks of transit hubs. They cross-referenced surveillance where it was available. They re-interviewed witnesses and monitored online chatter in hopes for any clue that could tell them what happened to Sebastian. Months later, the FBI renewed public appeals and officially offered a reward up to $50,000 for any information that would lead to Sebastian's whereabouts. Those public updates are the hard, steady markers of an investigation that publicly has not reached definitive answers. When nothing else works, they put a reward asking people for information. When we tell a missing person story, there are two threads we pull at the same time. The concrete, the who, the when, the where, and the human. The who they were, what their life looked like, how the people left behind speak of them. Sebastian's family have spoken again and again in interviews. His mother, his biological father, and step-family members, each of them offered small, aching images. The boy who liked certain video games, the routines of care, the person with a particular timetable that made the morning discovery all the more bewildering. He was a creature of habit. His father, in later interviews, insisted on hope and on memory. His mother described noises in the night before his disappearance, and later the unbearable normality of an empty bed. It just looked like he got up and went out, according to his mother. Those interviews are public, and they curl the human part of the case back towards the center of everything we discuss. There is an inevitable human impulse in the weeks and years after a vanishing, and that is, of course, hypothesizing, guessing. Some of these guesses are practical, like he wondered, he was vulnerable to the elements, and that he left deliberately for whatever reason. But of course, some of these other speculations are much darker. Someone took him. Someone within the home participated. Social media and online communities do what we always do. They shift, they argue, they gather videos and stills, and they have a lot of claims. On Reddit, there are dedicated threads, a subreddit by people who feel the case needs constant attention, which is good. Individuals there have shared everything from sympathetic remembrances to vigorous theories. Some posters point to alleged past abuse, some to neighborhood tensions, some to perceived oddities in the family's interviews. Where these claims are unverified, I will tell you. Community-led inquiries have debated whether flyers were removed, whether people were following the family, and whether small inconsistencies in memory suggest cover-up or simply the fog of trauma. Online communities can be a source of useful tips, and they can also be a place of rumor and wishful thinking, and both must be treated carefully. Let's get into the timeline of the case. Late evening, February 25th. Sebastian goes to bed in the family home. Morning of February 26th. Mother discovers he's missing. The house shows no forced entry. Surveillance and quick checks do not even show him leaving. Initial searches by neighbors and local teams expand rapidly. organized county and regional efforts. Days become weeks, and weeks become months. By the autumn of 2025, the FBI restated its appeal and emphasized that the investigation had not turned up definitive leads, while continuing to check tips and follow threads. The reward offer and renewed public messaging were intended to reach someone who might hold a piece of the puzzle, however small. There are several broad hypotheses that investigators and commentators have considered. 1. Sebastian left voluntarily. For a small but real number of missing teen cases, the simplest explanation is also possible: that the individual, despite vulnerabilities, decided to go somewhere alone. But this theory must confront two facts. First, that he left without essentials, and that he had medical and routine needs that families say he would not usually ignore. That does not render the theory impossible. It only makes it less comfortable. He left without shoes. You think he'd at least put on a pair of shoes in the cold weather of February. The second theory: he was taken by someone outside the household. Stranger abductions are statistically less common than family-involved disappearances, but they are within the realm of possibility, and they are checked by investigators through surveillance review, cell phone and digital forensics, and of course canvassing. The lack of a witness in the immediate area leaves this a difficult path for investigators, unless someone comes forward with a concrete sighting or documentation. And the third, which in my opinion is the most plausible, is that he was taken with the involvement or knowledge of someone inside the household or his close circle, which was his family. This is an area where I must be careful, precise, and as humane as I can. Family dynamics, as we all know, are complicated. There are reports in online forums, allegedly previous instances of physical discipline or abuse by a step-parent some years earlier, so this mother was living with Bradford. I don't remember his first name, but that's where she got Katie Proudfoot. And they're saying that the neighbors or some people heard and knew about the fact that his family was used to disciplining this poor child physically. These claims are community sourced, and where they are unverified, they, of course, are alleged. Investigators would treat such allegations as part of a broader inquiry into motive and means is not proof. Public reporting shows the family has been cooperative with investigators and also fractured in the way families who are under distress sometimes are. Understandable that they have grief, suspicion, and are desperate for answers. At the same time, they get a lot of public accusations and social media fictionalizing about them. I mean, it could be true, but it could be false. Alleged statements or social media posts are no evidence unless corroborated by official sources, which never have been so far. Another thread that surfaced publicly and should be treated gently and labeled is a speculation about the removal or tampering of missing person posters and flyers. How crazy is that? Some in online spaces say flyers were taken down. Others say flyers were tampered with. Who would want that? Who would want people stop looking for a 15-year-old missing child? Whether this is coordinated malicious behavior or maybe well-meaning citizens removing outdated flyers, I doubt, or the selective memory of a stressed community is just unclear. Did they imagine that the flyers were missing, or did they actually went missing by a person trying to derail the investigation? We don't know. It is the kind of detail that lights up online detectives, but rarely yields a smoking gun on its own. Still, investigators will check for patterns like that, because a pattern can sometimes point towards someone who doesn't want the public, of course, to look in a certain direction. Alleged flyer removals remain allegations until verified. Public figures and private investigators occasionally amplify missing person searches, and this case is no different. There were reports, again, not all uniformly verified, that private investigators and well-known bounty hunters expressed a lot of interest in assisting the search. Media coverage picked up on these developments. The essential point here is the same. Third-party involvement sometimes finds overlooked leads. It sometimes generates noise that could turn something up. And both are true and they matter. And they all deserve careful handling. Where reports about particular private investigators or reward increases come from tabloids, we should treat them as less than authoritative unless it is released by official news websites. But there are a lot of theories and speculations surrounding this case. I've said that investigators checked landfills, waterways, and large tracts of land. It is important to understand why. Geography kills more often than malice. In the grim arithmetic of missing person cases, it is often that they were lost to the weather, to the wilderness. When someone with autistic traits wanders, they lack shelter and they are exposed, and there are water hazards around, and they have difficulty of navigating unfamiliar terrain. It can very, very quickly become lethal for that individual, unfortunately. Search patterns look first for those practical risks. So they did underwater searches, shoreline checks, and grid searches with trained dog, and not dramatic for television. These searches are usually very slow, methodical, and a very heartbreaking work, especially when it comes up with no leads. People who volunteer for these searches often end up with the images of lost boots, and each have a small clue that they twisted into hope. It's understandable that if you're out on a search, you would like to look at everything as a sign of that missing person. But nothing that has ever been found has been proven to be from Sebastian. Law enforcement have asked the public to submit candid tips. Anything that looks out of place, or a memory of a car, a strange driver in the weeks before and after around that area, Hendersonville, Tennessee. It is really important. I doubt that anyone listening is even from Tennessee, but of course, if you remember anything and you haven't heard about this case before, if you remember something weird, just call it in, search for his name, and you'll find how to contact the investigators. Let us turn for a moment now to the family and their public demeanor, which people online, of course, have scrutinized to no end, me included. Public interviews are a peculiar window. They reveal grief and also imperfections. Grief is non-linear. It is messy. None of us can claim that we know what it feels to have our 15-year-old go missing, or to lose someone that close to us so suddenly. So none of us can really say what is normal to do. But we are humans, we judge. We can have our thoughts about how someone behaves. The outward calm of someone being interviewed can be shock. A tearful moment can be performance. A weird reply can just be from fatigue of answering the same questions over and over again with no answers. Investigators trained in interviewing victims and family members, of course, they look for consistency all across all of their accounts. They look for corroborative details and for signs that point them towards or away from further inquiry. Online commentators, they sometimes claim that body Body language can be suggestive and useful to trained interviewers who do this for a living, who are professionals who control conditions and compare repeated responses. But publicly, it is harder for us regular folks to look at someone and just outright say if they are lying or not. We can guess, but how can we ever be sure? Publicly, Sebastian's family have spoken of hope, of memory, and of frustration. They have also publicly asked for privacy. Interpreting micro-expressions from TV clips is an amateur's pastime. It is not a substitute for the painstaking work that police do interviewing these people. If you find yourself convinced by a single clip on social media, you need to pause. Most of the time, more information, timelines, records, corroborating witnesses is what resolves all of these ambiguities. Community members who have followed the case closely have compiled timelines, submitted tips, and flagged possible evidence. Some of what circulates online is the product of careful, forensic-minded people reviewing publicly available footage. But of course some others are just speculation. There were posts referencing distant sightings and rumors of sightings in other states. I remember that from the beginning. There was a picture, I made a video about it. There was a picture going around, everyone saying, this is Sebastian. He's seen in some other state with this older woman that they were speculating could be like from the family of the real dad. And maybe he got tired of how the mother and the stepfather were treating his son, and the fact that he wasn't getting full custody, and he kidnapped and let him live in some other state with his own family member. Has it ever been proven? Nope. Do you think if it was real, they would just let that go? No, I don't think that was Sebastian, unfortunately. And yes, investigators chased any leads across state lines that they thought appropriate, and it led to nothing. The FBI's involvement and the interagency coordination is designed precisely for this, to take national level resources and apply them to a case when local leads point outward. A renewed FBI notice in the second half of 2025 reiterated that leads had not borne conclusive results, but that tips were still needed. That public notice framed the case as still active and encouraged people to contact the FBI with any information, however small. There is a particular painful uncertainty with missing teen cases where family, neighbors, and investigators are all so close to the people involved. They want answers, all of them. And in the absence of the answers, we come up with some. Some of these answers are compassionate, but some understandably accusatory. The fact that the case has a subreddit, an industry of armchair sleuths, means that the memory of Sebastian Rogers persists online. It also means that sometimes conversation drifts into untested rumor, and who knows, maybe one of those rumors will someday lead to real answers. But of course it is important to say that it is alleged. Like, I personally think the family had something to do with it. Unfortunately, I think he either died of being given too much of a drug that they used to give him to keep him in bed. Maybe, allegedly, my opinion. And maybe that's why he passed. And they didn't know what to do. And got rid of his body. But where did they put him? How did they not come up with any leads? If that's the situation, if he just walked out, still wouldn't he be found even if he died? Why nothing came up? Why did he just vanish into thin air? If one tries carefully to assemble the most plausible scenarios from all of these patterns and searches I mentioned, there's only a few lines that emerge. The most tragic and statistically likely outcome in long unsolved abductions is that the person died soon after disappearance, either through exposure, an accident, or at the hands of another, depending on the circumstances, of course. It is a bleak statement, but it is grounded in reality. That time erodes evidence and memory. Another possibility is that someone helped him leave and kept him hidden. And the third is that he moved out of state and survived. How I hope this is the case. That is somewhere out there with people who care deeply about him, alive and happy. But that is often not what happens. Each of these require their own sets of evidence. That is why the investigators have continued to collect DNA, review footage, and work all the tips. Like a face in a grocery store camera, a partial plate, the recollection of a drug at a certain time. There's also the painful human side of how families cope in public. Family statements, when read across months, show cycles of hope and exhaustion. The language of a mother who insists, "I hear his voice," or a father who repeats a favorite memory is both raw and important. These are not sound bites, they are the only navigation people have through trauma. Media sometimes frames the family as suspect or as heroic, but reality is usually much more ordinary. Could be an aching family, a community that alternates between supportive and suspicious, and investigators who are doing the procedural work that yields answers in only a minority of these sorts of cases. Alright, you guys, I know it felt like a lot of rambling and not enough information, and that just happens to be the case with a lot or most of missing person cases. Especially in this one, there is not much to work with. Not even a single sock, not a shoe, not a piece of clothing, not even his glasses. At the beginning they were like, oh, his glasses were found, this was found, that was found. Nothing was ever found. That is mind-boggling to me. How did this happen? What was going on behind closed doors to this boy before he went missing? Did something cause him to leave the house? If it did, why would he leave without his shoes at least? If he didn't leave on his own accord, who made him leave? Where was he taken? And last but not least, what if he never left the house alive? We all have our theories. We can all look at someone's face and be like, oh, I think that's a murderer. But at the end, we have no clue. I might just come off as a jerk, judging a mother in pain. I have no clue. But I hope to God that either Sebastian Rogers is out there safe with a family member, and one day they're gonna come out and say to the family, mother and stepfather and father, that he's safe. But if he was betrayed by someone who was supposed to take care of him, I hope to God that their soul may be at peace, both Sebastian's and the person that might have hurt him. Because how awful is that? A boy in need, someone so sweet. This case really messes up in my head every time I think about it. But honestly, there's no use to keep talking right now, because I have nothing. No one has anything. But somehow, with the grace of God, you have a memory. If you were in the area, if you think you've heard, seen something, definitely let investigators know. And maybe one day we will have some answers and some justice for Sebastian Rogers. This far into this video, if you wanted to fall asleep, I hope that you already are. And if you are, I hope that it is lucid and full of things of happiness, restfulness, and joy, and nothing of this darkness that exists all around us. Thank you so much for listening, maybe watching, and don't forget to check out my Patreons. And thank you to all of my lovely patrons. will see you guys soon. Bye bye.